Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to 8 cities that aren't cool now but will be from Geography King. And I mean, it's a pretty self-explanatory video. I guess these are cities that may be struggling now but have plans to rebuild or whatever it is, to be fair. I don't really know, but we're going to check this out. Hopefully you're going to enjoy. Links are also in the description to my Patreon where you can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube. And let's check this out.
Howdy, it's Kyle talking about some cities in the US that are not cool right now, but because of reasons I'll discuss, I think will become much more desirable places to live and cities you'll hear much more talked about as nice places to move to.
Okay.
Right now, housing is very expensive in the US, and the places that have seen the most population growth have seen some of the highest increases in housing costs, but there still are some inexpensive places, but for the most part, they're not growing that much. So the ones I'll be mentioning here are growing a little bit, but not that much. And so if these cities were stocks, I'd be buying. And I'm not going to be covering these like a countdown, but the last one that I mentioned, I think, is the safest bet of all these as to which one will become cool and much more expensive in the future. But yeah, let's take a look at 8 cities in the US that aren't cool right now, but will be. I'm going to start off with my favorite city on the list, and one I've discussed before, and that's El Paso, Texas. It has about 677,000 people. It's the 22nd largest city in the US. However, the metro area has just over 1 million and it makes it 61st largest metro.
I mean, it's massive. The location is wild. Living in this region of the city must be pretty insane because you're literally living in the mountains. I mean, these are built within the mountains, no? Because there's already a bit of a rise when it's going up to this bit, and then the mountain range is just behind it. These houses here are literally on mountains. What the hell?
True. So most of the metro is the city of El Paso itself. This is in the far west end of Texas. It's in the mountain time zone and very far from the other large metros in the state. As of right now, it's a very blue-collar type city.
Oh, is this the city with the really crazy, like, change of scenery on the border with Mexico? Where the US side is all, like, I guess a bit nicer. I think the Mexican side is either not as nice or it's just a wall where the city just suddenly stops. I think that's El Paso, isn't it?
It's big for transport and trade with the international border. It's the second largest international crossing in the US. It's huge for military with Fort Bliss. It's a big part of the oil and gas industry with some of the big fields being not too far from there. Housing is cheaper than the other large metros in the state. You aren't attracting big high-tech jobs that are high wage. So people that might move there might be looking for just a regular type job or looking to do something online from.
It's pretty cheap as well. And this is in dollars, 4 beds, 3 bathrooms. Yeah, they're pretty cheap, to be honest, compared to what I'm used to. To be honest, they are way cheaper than what I'm used to. And El Paso is a big city. Damn.
From home. So I think for the time being, it will remain relatively affordable because you're not attracting big 6-figure jobs. And I know I do put extra emphasis on physical geography, but it is really good around El Paso. It has a really nice climate, not the hot, humid summers of East Texas. Because you're higher elevation, it isn't super hot during the summer. It is pretty hot, but it is much more of a dry heat. And winters aren't that cold. You might get a dusting of snow every now and then, but it's pretty mild all winter.
Damn.
So why isn't El Paso popular? It's actually lost a few thousand people since the pandemic. Part of that is because, again, it's not a high-tech magnet, so you're not getting a ton of people moving for those types of jobs. It's right across the river from Juarez, Mexico, which is one of the most dangerous cities in the world.
Oh, damn.
However, it's not really very secret that El Paso is one of the cities.
So it is literally on the border. That's so wild. So this is obviously, it's a border that separates a really dangerous city from what he said. And then I guess El Paso, I don't think it's seen as dangerous. I don't know really, but I think it's seen as just a decent city to live in, like he's explaining here. And it's just wild how it could all be blocked off by a border throughout the whole city. Do some people live in the city here and then just sort of emigrate to here or whatever? They'll travel here every day to work. Is that allowed? That probably isn't allowed really, but
safest big cities. It's not the safest big city in the country, so being right there next to Mexico doesn't affect the crime rates in El Paso itself.
Damn.
But I think eventually it's going to be known to more mainstream sources that El Paso is a really cool city. It's relatively cheap, and you're still in Texas. So if you want those Texas laws and taxes, well, you're still within the state borders. So if you like the idea of a Texas lifestyle, but maybe not the tornadoes and the hurricanes and the high humidity, well, then check out El Paso.
Fascinating place.
The next ones I want to mention is very near and dear to my heart, Columbia, South Carolina. It's the capital of the state, has about 140,000 people, and it's growing. Richland County, where it is, has about 420,000. I lived there for 5 years, and it's where I met my wife, and I really liked it there. And one thing I really liked about the city is just how walkable it is. The more dense interior core extends farther out than you get in many other.
God damn, it's so samey, so perfect. Like just squares and non-stop squares. I know the US loves that, but look at that. It's literally like just perfect rectangles, and there's a few squares in between after rectangles. That's so wild. And it's just it's an instant split from this part of the city.
Sunbelt type cities. So you can be a good few miles away from downtown, and it's still a good area for walking. We would be walking around parts of the city that are nowhere near downtown. There have been some big revitalization projects since we moved from there. One of the main ones is what they've done with Main Street. Right there along Main Street is where you have some of the more high-end type of restaurants, and on Saturday mornings they close down the street to cars and have a big outdoor market there. It's called the Soda City Market.
Damn.
And there's another recent development at the north end of downtown where they had the old state mental hospital that they shut down and tore it down, and now it's where the minor league baseball stadium is. There's several nice wooded areas outside of the city, but most importantly, you have a great national park nearby. The Congaree River flows right through downtown, and there are boat launches there. You can paddle from downtown Columbia right into the beautiful swamps of Congaree National Park. It's a half an hour to drive there or a couple hours to float there. And the reason why I have Columbia on this list is because housing there is still strangely very affordable. Even in what I think is the best part of town, the Shandon Heathwood area east of downtown, you can still get houses for a very good price.
3-bed, $275,000. $275,000. That's pretty insane for, again, another relatively decently sized city. He said this is the nicest area of the city. 3 beds. I'm looking at these prices and I'm looking at my country and I'm like, what the hell? Or my city even. Why are these so much cheaper? So much goddamn cheaper. And you probably get loads more space overall. God damn.
And this is not a gentrified area. This is that part of town that's always been pretty nice. It's never been a rundown area that you've seen some recent people moving there. It's always been the really cool historic part of town to live in. There is no way I can stay like this for too much longer with how much more expensive Greenville and Charleston and Myrtle Beach have gotten. So yeah, my wife and I really like Columbia, and in talking...
This is a 3-bedroom house. This is a pretty big house with just 3 bedrooms. Jeez. Look at the size of that. Bloody hell.
About it and doing this video, I'm like, why don't we just move back? And maybe we will, but for right now, it is still kind of a hidden gem. It's growing, but nowhere near to the extent of some of these other big cities in the Sun Belt. Okay, keeping it in the Sun Belt, I want to now talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Of all the cities on this list, Tulsa is the least hidden gem of them all. There's been some population growth, and it has been talked about as a place that might grow a lot more, but isn't getting anywhere near as much attention from the mainstream press as Oklahoma City. The population is about 411,000, and like most cities in the U.S., it's seen population decline since COVID. But even before then, it wasn't growing very much. There was population decline between 2000 and 2010, and just moderate growth between 2010 and 2020. In fact, prior to COVID, 2018 and 2019, the city was paying people $10,000 just to move there.
Wow.
So they're not going to pay you $10,000 to move there now, but there have been some pretty nice projects going on downtown and in the city that I think will really improve it and make it a much more desirable place.
That's a beautiful picture.
So one of the main things they're doing right now is redeveloping the riverfront along the Arkansas River that flows through the city. So they've already finished the first major phase of this riverfront project. It's called the Gathering Place. And in my opinion, this was a really well-designed project. It's really cool to have this park right downtown along the river, a great spot for people, families to congregate. And Tulsa doesn't really have a Central Park or Golden Gate Park kind of place, so this is almost like a new created version, although it's nowhere near as big as those. And something else they're doing is a really cool brand new pedestrian bridge over the river. So this is the next main phase of the project, and when it's completed, I think this is going to be really cool. Where I live in Chattanooga has a pedestrian bridge over the Tennessee River, and it's a really cool spot. It's become the focal point of downtown. And I really think a pedestrian bridge, if it's done like this, can become a really cool spot because it funnels people onto this thing. So if you're coming from one side of downtown, you're going to the other area, everybody passes through here, and it becomes kind of a destination in and of itself. City leaders are also focused on infill, which is really good because a lot of these Sunbelt type cities are much more spread out, wider roads, much more large suburban type houses. So with this infill and these new huge projects along the riverfront, Tulsa is becoming kind of a cool place. Now, Oklahoma isn't one of those states that people are moving to for low taxes. It's not a low tax state, but it does have low housing costs. So if that is really more important to you than low taxes, then check out Tulsa. The
Shout out
next one
Tulsa.
that I want to discuss is another city I'm quite familiar with,
Fresno.
and that's Fresno, California. And kind of like Tulsa, you've heard some mumbling about Fresno becoming a more popular spot, but it is still right now relatively inexpensive and not cool. The population is about 545,000 and is growing.
Still big.
Fresno County has just over 1 million people.
Massive.
Now, admittedly, the city has no idea what they're doing with downtown. They've really fumbled the ball there for decades. They've had some just really dubious leadership.
Is this the view you get from the flipping hell? Look at the view from the city. Holy shit.
And so some of the decisions they made about what to do with downtown have been, I think, pretty poor, but downtown was treated kind of like an afterthought as people moved to more bigger houses on the edge of the cities and out into the suburbs. And for any city, not just Fresno, I think a healthy downtown is very important. Most cities might have one or maybe even two farmers markets, but with Fresno being the agricultural capital of the world, you have several farmers markets and they're all great. But let's be honest, the main reason why I'm putting it in this video is because housing there is much less expensive than the coast. But similar to El Paso, it's not a magnet for high-tech jobs, so you're not going to have
So 3 beds. I like the other house more for sure, but still. The pricing, damn.
people moving there for employment opportunities unless you're looking just for like a regular type job. But if you can work from home, maybe you work in the Silicon Valley, you can only have to go to work maybe once or twice a week. You can take the high-speed rail to there. So I think
This place is a bit pricier than the other ones for sure.
Fresno will benefit a lot from the high-speed rail more than the Bay Area or LA will.
That's a nice.
I think the high-speed rail will make Fresno a more desirable place because people will be able to get there much more easily from the Bay Area or LA. And if you have family that live in those places that are much more expensive, you can live in Fresno or other parts of the valley, much less expensive, but still be able to visit them very easily. And yes, I am biased toward this part of the country, but I do genuinely think that Fresno and the surrounding area will become much more desirable to live in the coming years. Okay, now heading up into the Rust Belt, I'm going to Dayton, Ohio. There are about 137,000 people in the city, 535,000 in the county, and about 1 million people in the Dayton-Springfield metro area. And there's been a slight decline in the population of both the city and the county in recent years. And the main reason why I want to include Dayton on this list is where it's located within Ohio.
Looks a bit dated. Huh? Here. I'm sorry. On this image here, but the one before with like the bridges and like the greenery looked pretty nice, to be fair.
It's in the southwestern portion of the state, with the metro area being nicely sandwiched between Cincinnati and Columbus.
Decent location.
You might have a household with a so-called split commute where one person commutes to Cincinnati and another to Columbus, and that would be a nice spot to live where you can each commute and it wouldn't be that long of a drive if you're only doing it a couple days a week. But the reason why it's not cool right now is because downtown isn't that interesting and there aren't really many cool type neighborhoods. And similar to Tulsa, there's been a lot of redevelopment along the river. In Dayton, it's the Miami River. So you've had some improvement to the park and the paths there, although it isn't anywhere near as big as the one in Tulsa. But just like in Tulsa, there's a new pedestrian bridge being built. And when done, this thing is going to be really cool and be a legitimate magnet to downtown. City leaders in Dayton certainly have to know about the Purple People Bridge, which is the pedestrian bridge over the Ohio River connecting Cincinnati to Newport, Kentucky. But that bridge is very narrow. It's great as a way to get across the river, just a convenient way to walk, but it's very narrow and isn't big enough to have things on it. You're not going to have people congregate on that bridge. But city leaders might also be familiar with Chattanooga, that again has this really cool bridge. It used to be an actual car bridge, so it's wide enough for 2 cars plus shoulders. So now that it's just pedestrian, it's very wide, and you can have events on there. There's wine tasting things and music events and street vendors on, the normal weekends and street performers kind of thing. And that's where I did my questions on the street. So that kind of thing is what brings people to downtown. People from the suburbs will actually drive downtown, park, and then walk around for something like that. But I think some of this major redevelopment of the riverfront downtown will have a hugely positive effect for the city, which will also have an impact on some of the nearby neighborhoods. And there will almost certainly be continued gentrification in Dayton, but there's a lot of abandoned buildings, a lot of open space in the city that isn't being used. I think there's room for gentrification there. But for right now, Dayton is still pretty cheap. It's off people's radar, but I don't think it's going to stay that way for much longer. Keeping it in the Rust Belt, I'm going one state over to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Bethlehem.
It has a
Goddamn.
population of about 76,000 people. The county has about
So this is probably a very similar size to my city.
320,000.
See, this is what confuses me. The population of the city is 70,000 or whatever, but then the county is 320,000. Where is... Wait, there's a place called Nazareth in Bethlehem. That's pretty cool. Where does the county end? Like, does the county sort of come into this area? Because if it comes into this area, then obviously it's not really part of the city. But if it's just counting like these surrounding areas here, then I don't really know how to judge it, because that seems like a pretty high... I mean, the county's 300,000 people plus. So the county's got to be a massive area around here as well. But anyway, doesn't matter. But yeah, it's near New York, near Philadelphia.
And the metro area, which includes the
In terms of the US, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably, what, like 2 hours, 3 hours?
adjacent county, which is where Allentown is, has about 700,000. There's been some slow growth. It has actually been growing since 1980. Most cities in southeast Pennsylvania were still losing population at that time. And that's mainly because a lot of the other cities in that area lost their big factory before then, but Bethlehem Steel hung on until 2003 when it shut down. But the city does benefit from a couple of things. One, it's home to Lehigh University, so whenever you have a university there, it kind of provides an anchor, so if everything else goes away, there will at least be that university there.
Jesus.
And similar to Dayton, it benefits from being really close to a much larger metro. In this case, it's about 1 hour north of Philadelphia. And much of the rest of southeast Pennsylvania is still kind of rough from the Rust Belt days, whether it be Allentown, Harrisburg, York, or Reading. There's still a lot of rust around that part of the state. But Bethlehem, along with Lancaster, are a little bit nicer, and Lancaster has already been growing by a decent amount. The downtown is pretty nice. There's good walkability there. There's a nice riverfront path along the Lehigh River. So between Lehigh University and Bethlehem Steel holding on for longer than most other plants in the region, the downtown stayed pretty nice through all these years. And one thing that the city did that I think was a good idea was how they redeveloped the old Bethlehem.
What the hell? That's pretty cool, actually. I mean, they've done something out there, and it's actually somewhat worked. Because look at that background. Look at how sort of the lighting looks and reflects on this area as well.
Bethlehem Steel plant. They left most of it up as a backdrop and used the area as a community park. They have a lot of concerts there and festivals, and at night it lights up with multicolors. On New Year's Eve, they had Peeps Fest. They drop a giant peep like the ball in Times Square for New Year's. And once the whole world knows about this, everyone's going to want to move there. So right now is the time to check out Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, while it's still
pretty cheap. I mean, 4 beds for $299,000. And this actually looks like quite a nice house as well. Damn. Okay.
cheap. The next one that I want to mention is the smallest one on this list, Lake Charles, Louisiana. The population is about 80,000 people, and it had been growing for many years up until 2020, and unfortunately Hurricane Laura hit the city very badly and the population dropped. But in general, southwestern Louisiana is the part of the state that's seen the most economic growth in recent years. It's largely dependent on the energy industry, including oil and natural gas. So kind of like Bethlehem, you have a large blue-collar type industry. Of course, in this case, it's still going, but also a university that provides a little bit of an anchor. But one thing I like about the city is that it has a cute and charming downtown. Those aren't words you usually hear associated with Louisiana City downtowns. So for people that are in the oil and gas industry that might not want to be in a bigger city, or for people that are in other parts of Louisiana that are much more economically distressed, Lake Charles can be a great place. But nonetheless, it's still pretty cheap there, and cheaper than either New Orleans or Houston. Now, hurricanes are a serious concern there. Again, one just hit 3 years ago, but natural disasters really aren't much of a deterrent for people to move to places. You think of all the growth in Florida and Houston and the coast of the Carolinas, people aren't deterred by a hurricane threat. And even though of all...
I definitely would be. I mean, I'm unique because I've never faced any of this stuff and I don't want to, but that would definitely put me off moving to certain places for sure.
All the cities on this list, Lake Charles might not actually become cool, but I do think it is a shining light in this region compared to other cities in its size range, especially in other parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And the last one that I want to mention is the one that I think has the best chance of becoming a cool city while not being cool right now, and that's Memphis. It's in the southwest corner of Tennessee. The western suburbs are in Arkansas. The southern suburbs are in Mississippi. There are about 630,000 people in the city, and it's been declining in population since 2000. Shelby County has about 930,000 with some slow growth. And Memphis is a city where you normally only hear about it from a negative context, which has a really high crime rate, really high poverty rate. The fact that the old arena in the pyramid downtown got turned into a Bass Pro Shops is kind of a joke. And much of the negative attention towards Memphis is warranted. It does have many problems with crime, drugs, and poverty. But I think two things are going to change that and make Memphis much more of an interesting and attractive destination. The first is something pretty surprising, and that is the year 2022 was the first year where more people moved from Nashville to Memphis than vice versa. But Nashville has become very expensive. Much of the new housing downtown has been turned into short-term rentals, and the city has also gone much bigger on tourism, which usually provides lower wages. But over in Memphis, it's the same low wages, but cheaper housing. There are already several interesting neighborhoods in Memphis. I think the downtown is okay. It's kind of touristy around Beale Street, but Midtown's pretty cool. The area around Overton Park and Overton Square is pretty cool. The University of Memphis is a huge university. You have the medical district there, St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And those are all great things to have as a base to a city, but I think the one thing that's going to change Memphis more than anything is the all-new Ford plant being built about a half an hour east of the city. They're calling it Blue Oval City. And this thing is huge. It's going to be several square miles, which is why it has to be so far from the city center. There just isn't that much space closer in. And this is going to bring in thousands of jobs, and there's going to be a big pull on housing in the area, and it's almost certainly going to get more expensive. With the plant being a half an hour east of the city, I'm sure many people are going to live in the eastern end of the city, probably even in the eastern suburbs. But there will always be people that want to live closer to the city center, and you're going to see more strain on housing in the city of Memphis itself. So right now, Memphis is still very cheap, but people from Nashville are moving here, and once that Ford plant opens up, those are going to be high-paying jobs. It's not going to be real cheap in Memphis, so if you're looking to buy into something, looking to buy a stock in the city, metaphorically, then buy Memphis. So that's my look at 8 cities in the U.S. But
I enjoyed this. I mean, these gave fair reasons as to why certain cities are going to prosper. I guess it's just cool to look into certain things that are happening within these cities that, hey, they're looking to try and make a difference, and that's obviously a positive that you got to love to see. Truck driver here are my most underrated cities in the US in no particular order: Buffalo, Chattanooga, Albuquerque, Kansas City, Mobile, Burlington, Manchester, Tallahassee, Cheyenne. How do you say it? Cheyenne? Tri-Cities, Milwaukee, Savannah, Omaha, Lincoln. To me, Omaha, Wait, is it Omaha? Omaha, New England is a very underrated city. Moved there from New York City in 2021. I mean, I've not really seen much of Omaha, but that's been mentioned twice, and maybe it's the place to be. I mean, I don't actually know, but let me know your thoughts on these. If you live in these cities, let me know what you think of this video. If you think there's much hope for your cities, do you think he's over-exaggerating? Do you think he's got a point with your city? Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.